Welcome everyone. I'm Jennifer Gunn. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study. And before we get started, I just want to make a couple of announcements. And I'll be standing here behind the computer that dictates our lives. So today's talk, you already know probably what this is, and we'll come back to this. Oops, what happened to it? Okay, next week. Next week, this is a tofurkey for the vegetarians in the room, but it's a reminder that we have no Thursdays at 4 next week. I hope you all are eating happily somewhere else. And on December 3rd, we have a sort of double billing event, but the Thursdays at 4 part on December 3rd is Exploring Food and Agriculture Across all the usual boundaries with Valentine Cadieux and Nick Jordan. So please come, it's going to be a lot of fun, and later that evening there will be a probably already full, but not necessarily, presentation by Will Steger and Todd Roitbold of the Institute on the Environment on Eyewitness to Climate Change. All right, and since I put these in the wrong order, today our event is going to be really fun and far more participatory than usual. How to Make It to the Dance Floor, a Salsa Guide for Women based on actual experiences, is a play that's written by Cindy Garcia. And Cindy is, Cindy is an assistant professor in the Department of Theater Arts.
Associate.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is what you get. Okay, so, all right. This is what I get for reading websites. And I don't keep mine up to date either. Anyway, Cindy is an associate professor, yay, in the Department of Theater Arts and Dance. And among her many life roles, she's also a dance theorist, a performance ethnographer, and a playwright. Witness our project today. She won the Selma Jean Cohen Award in 2009 for scholarship in theater and dance movement-based fields from the American Society for Theater Research. And in 2010, she received a Ford Foundation Research Fellowship. Her book, Salsa Crossings, Dancing Latinidad in Los Angeles, was published by Duke University Press and is available outside at a bargain price from the bookstore. This semester, Cindy's an IAS fellow, and she's working on the play that you will see part of today. And this year, Thursdays at 4 is trying to do more bridging between the works of our fellows and collaboratives and our speakers. And so it was Cindy's choice to bring in her collaborator, Lucy Mason Pablo Burns from UCLA. And I will let Cindy introduce this. Thank you. Thank you. You should really do your slides. Okay, that's good. We'll just leave it right there.
Okay, so first I'd like to say thank you to the IAS for funding this project so that Lucy Burns and I can continue collaborating on this project. Lucy is the dramaturg. So this play is based on my ethnographic research on the politics of migration and Latinidad in Los Angeles nightclubs, Los Angeles salsa clubs in particular. And I did that field work 1999 to 2005. And since then, being in the field, it was so surreal sometimes that I felt that a play was starting to emerge, and so I went with it. So Lucy and I did a staged reading of a draft of this play in 2008 here at the University of Minnesota. And during that time, we took copious notes that we put in the vault until this semester. We had both got tenure, and then now we're back on this project. Let's see, so for the last few months this semester, in addition to a major overhaul of the text, the choreographic component has been under development so that the dancing creates meaning alongside the text rather than merely illustrating it. Over the weekend, this past weekend, I brought in Professor Raquel Monroe from Columbia College Chicago and to work with me and 8 volunteer dancers to bring the choreographies to life. On Tuesday and Wednesday, then Lucy Burns came to town and we worked with several students, faculty, and staff to prepare the staged reading for today. So we've had a very short rehearsal time. We're putting together just a very short bit of this play, and it's really just the text and the choreography. We have not even gotten to collaborate yet with set designers, costumers. There's a lot that has to still happen. But today we'd like to see what's going on. We'd like to share with you what's going on with the text and the choreography. So I would like to more fully now introduce Lucy Burns, Lucy Mesa and Pablo Burns, who is an associate professor at UCLA's Asian American Studies program. She's the author of Puro Arte, author of Puro Arte, it's because it was right over performing. Puro Arte, on the Filipino Performing Body, published by NYU Press. It's actually an award-winning book, so I advise you to check it out. Current inquiries for Lucy include representations of the future in performance through the figure of the robot and the Commonwealth as an American identity. Burns is also a dramaturg whose recent collaborations include David Youssef's Stardust and Ars Amor Lindmark's But Beautiful and Teatro Productions' Global Taxi Driver. She has participated in several projects focusing on Asian American theater and performance, including attending the 2007 World Social Forum as a member of a U.S. artist delegation and as a reviewer for the National Asian American Theater Festival in 2009 and 2011. So I would like to very happily present my colleague, collaborator, Lucy Burns.
Hi everybody, good afternoon, and thank you, Professor Garcia, for that introduction, a warm introduction, and always very happy to be back here in Minnesota at the university. I want to thank the Institute for bringing me out here to continue this work with Professor Garcia, and also the other collaborating entities, the Department of Theater, Arts and Dance, Immigration History Research Center, Asian American Studies Department here, Chicano Latino Studies, and the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies Department. I always like to mention the collaborating entities because it speaks to the kind of work that we're doing, the kind of people that we're able to bring together in the work itself. And they make this work possible. So thank you so much. So the theme of today's presentation is, it's really an exploration of migrant subjectivities in migrant conditions, migrant social relations in theater and dance, through theater and dance. Before I continue, I just want to mention that we're going to be shifting a lot of gears, so we need folks to be prepared. And, you know, I'll give this brief introduction, and then we're going to have actually the featured play. We'll be reading the featured play, and then we're going to be able to present some of the choreographic components, and we'll signal that. So you'll be forewarned when it's happening. I don't really have a lot of images to show you. It's just a marker. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for warmly introducing the event. So as I mentioned, today's presentation explores migrant subjectivities, migrant conditions, migrant social relations. And I just want to pull out a couple of questions that that's guiding us in this project. How do social spaces of leisure such as salsa club, construct gender, class, and race relations, and how do these spaces construct gender, class, and race formations? What sorts of power struggles happen in the dance hall or in the salsa clubs? In the first book that I wrote, or that Cindy mentioned, Puro Arte, it's really when it was the time when I first met Professor Garcia, and we'd have these conversations about these sites of leisure for migrants. And in my own work, I'm interested in the intersection of migration and performance, particularly in the site of taxi dance halls for Filipinos in the 1920s and 1930s in Southern California. So as I consider this social site my exploration of U.S.-Philippine imperial relations for Filipino patrons in the taxi dance halls during the 20s and 30s, and this is also the dawn of Philippine independence, it's also the beginning of an intense anti-Filipino sentiment in the West Coast. Filipino splendid dancing gained attention in the taxi dance halls, yet it did not necessarily gain them a sense of belonging outside the dance hall. In fact, this very performance of bodily knowledge and ability further enhanced Filipino difference and contributed to hostilities towards Filipinos. So, I also want to go into a little bit about my dramaturgy work so that there's kind of a context of what other works I've done, what other themes I've chosen to, and artists I've chosen to work with. Professor Garcia mentioned my work with David Rusev's Stardust. It is an interdisciplinary dance theater piece exploring coming-of-age experiences in an era of social media. Continuing Rusev's meditation on Black racial identity, in Stardust, Rusev confronts questions of connectivity and queer sexuality. As a dramaturg, I worked with Rusev on the framing story shown in the performances as text messages. I provided research that informed the piece about the various uses and meanings of social media for queer of color youth, as well as the overlap of technology and spirituality over desires for human connectivity and belief in connections beyond this temporal realm. I was also a humanities consultant for Theater Productions Global Taxi Drivers. It is a community-based theater project. And I believe they were in residence here in Minnesota. And I think that was the last time I was here in Minneapolis. They worked with Pangea World Theater and what's the other theater? Another theater? Intermedia.
Intermediate arts.
Thank you, Intermediate. Amazing space. So I was a humanities consultant for that project. And as a consultant, I provided research materials to put into context the emergence of contemporary taxi working conditions within migratory labor force. I also conceptualized the pro-show panel held at LA Inner City Arts to foreground what the arts can bring to already existing sociological observations of the taxi industry. For theater artists interested in changing social relations in this highly globalized world and shifting borders, taxi riding and driving make for compelling stages of interaction and collisions, or in theater terms, a rich scene of drama. So let me get back to how to make it to the dance floor. Professor Garcia and I focus on the kinds of relationships between migrants in spaces of leisure. We're interested in depicting relations of power laterally, not simply horizontally. We approach these spaces of leisure not exclusively as devoid of racial politics happening outside the clubs. Concerned with the forms of power relations and power struggles, we're concerned with the forms of power relations and power struggles that occur in social spaces, as well as the formation of racialized, gendered, and sexualized identities. In this scholarships I was looking at in the 1920s and 30s, those were actually written by sociologists for the Filipino migrants and patrons in the taxi dance halls. These spaces were highly policed, they were highly regulated, but simultaneously they were spaces of affirmation, opposition, and counterculture, and also spaces that were perceived as a space for upward mobility. But I was really interested in, you know, it was a celebration of Filipino masculinity, and I was interested in how, in what ways, other ways that we can kind of open up the migrant subjectivities, because the women they were dancing with in the taxi dance halls were also immigrants. And so the upward mobility was always sort of just attached to the Filipino migrant body, their male bodies, not necessarily the women they were dancing with. So I was interested in understanding Filipino patrons' perceived mobility as splendid dancers within their status as nationals, not aliens or not citizens in the United States, that afforded them more mobility than those categorized as aliens, but not equal rights as those who are citizens. And in thinking about migrant social relations and migrant subjectivity, I wanted to share an excerpt from the work of art historian Saloni Matur. It's an introduction to an anthology titled Migrants' Time, and I think this really expresses how we approach the politics of social relations in the play and broadly in our work on migrants. The privileging of the migrant does not imply a celebration of affirmation of that nomadic, nor does it present the migrant as a trope that is automatically synonymous with a space of resistance in cultural terms. Rather, the field of human and societal relationships brought into view through the paradigm of the migrant is more ambivalent and indeterminate. It represents some of the most difficult forms of entanglement and separation resulting from our collective condition. The unsettling crisis of dislocation and non-belonging, and the necessity of searching for alternative connections to communities of inhabitation over space and time. I wrote a very different introduction to the play, and then when I was reading it yesterday and practicing it, it was 50 minutes. I said, oh my God, I have to change this completely. And this is the beauty of having gotten here, you know, a few days early, that I could afford to rethink a more appropriate kind of introduction that would fit what we're actually doing here today. So, in the longer presentation, I talk about many other performances I look at, from cultural performances in the International Migrants Alliance, meetings in Mexico City and Hong Kong, as well as some community-based theater productions in Los Angeles. In Arizona, there was a festival called SB 1070. It's a festival call to protest the SB 1070 bill. Okay, let me return to this now. So some of the themes of How to Make It to the Dance Floor, a salsa guide for women, include migrant relations, hierarchies, and power struggles, and rebellions. For this evening, we'll only be sharing an excerpt of this play. We are grateful to all who have helped us read this play by sharing their voices, calling these characters and stories into life by reading them aloud. So I wanted to just, I'm seeing a few folks. Last Tuesday, the IAS lunch hour, we had the fellows read coldly. We just put the script in front of them and said, now you're reading. So, and it was an incredibly lively discussion. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and thank those. Some of them are also participating tonight. But for those who helped us read on Tuesday, can you please raise your hand, just so folks know? Thank you. So I wanted to acknowledge and thank you so much. And it's really, really helpful for us to hear this and then come back to the play and say, okay, we should take out that line. You know, it's very helpful for our process. And then we're also excited that for this round of developing this play, with the support of multiple programs here in Minnesota, Professor Garcia was able to host Professor Raquel Monroe over the weekend to work with a terrific group of people on exploring some of the choreographic elements of the play that we're fortunate enough to be able to share through the work of these generous volunteers, giving up hours and hours and hours of their lives for this. So we're able to show that this evening. So I'm going to close it here now so we can get to the play. The play is unwieldy, ambitious, and has numerous elements. Like any other play, it is richly exploring how the politics of Latinidad is formed, transformed, and enacted in Salsa-Hudson, Los Angeles. This is something that Professor Garcia tried to capture in the language of the play, the language of the characters, through the movement components of the play. And for tonight, we'll be hearing two sections of the play. All of the first section, titled Rule Number 1, Wear Desired Attire, and also as a part of Rule Number 2, which is Learn How to Dance Ahead of Time. There are multiple components that we have been able to work with in the workshop, and there's some other ones that I just want to mention, like you can imagine the music, costume, makeup, and other visual components to this play. So you'll hear that. Afterwards, so after the reading and the movement performance, we'd love to have, if we had time, a discussion. All right. And I just wanted to leave with this, some other ideas to keep in mind. So with feminization of labor came increased demand in forms of flexible labor and mobility. So this is just kind of a bigger, larger global context that I wanted to have hover over our minds. And I'm really, in the other part, like I said, in the other talk that I wrote, I'm really interested in the idea of flexibility and mobility as it's mobilized in the politics and scholarship of migration, global migration, and then how flexibility and mobility operates in performance studies and dance studies. So I think this play is actually exploring the intersections and what values and how we can think about flexibility and mobility in relation to global labor. And the play, our readers, please come take your stand.